What if I told you there's a man who seemed to understand your deepest problems without you having to say a word? It might sound like the fiction stuff, but for Milton Erickson, a pioneering psychiatrist and hypnotherapist, this is the skill he mastered. Erickson unlocked a power deeply rooted into our brain, the profound ability to read and interpret the subtlest cues of body language, a skill our ancestors developed over 200,000 years ago. Erickson cured thousands of almost incurable patients, with most of them saying he possessed some psychic abilities and could read minds. His patients didn't say a word, but Erickson knew the problem right after seeing them walk, sit, and gesture with their hands. This is the power that our ancestors developed in the past, and this is the story of one of the most powerful figures in the psychotherapy and hypnotherapy industry, Dr. Milton Erickson. And this is how God created his path to become such a legend who will solve your problem without you having to tell him what it is. Tragic destiny of Milton Erickson. One morning in August 1919, the 17-year-old Milton Erickson woke up and found that some parts of his body were suddenly paralyzed. A few days had passed, the paralysis spread, and soon he was diagnosed with polio, which back then was a deadly epidemic. While Milton was laying in bed, he overheard his mom talking to two doctors in another room. Thinking he was sleeping, one doctor said he wouldn't make it through the night. His mom came into his room trying not to show her grief, not knowing Milton had heard everything. Milton started asking his mom to move a dresser with a mirror close to his bed back and forth. She thought he was just confused, but Milton had a plan. He wanted to make his mom think about something else so she wouldn't be so sad, and he also wanted the mirror to be in the perfect spot. So if he began to lose his consciousness, he could look at the sunset in the mirror and try to stay awake by watching it. He thought if the sun could come back every day, maybe he could make it through this. And not long after, Milton fell into a coma. But 3 days later, he miraculously regained his consciousness. He's still alive, but now he can't move at all. His entire body is paralyzed, and he cannot communicate in any way. All he can move is his eyeballs, which is enough to scan some parts of his room. In rural Wisconsin, where he grew up on their family farm, Milton became a prisoner in his own room. He's got his big family around, 7 sisters, a brother, his parents, and a nurse. Milton Erickson's polio is an inevitable force of nature. See, Milton has a very active mind, and being stuck there, unable to move any parts of his body, feels like hell for him. But then, something interesting happens. One day, as he's listening to his sister's conversation, Milton notices something he never paid attention to before. Their faces and the way they talk say a lot more than the words coming out of their mouths. Like, one of his sisters says, "Yes, that's a good idea," in such a flat voice and with a smirk, making it clear she doesn't mean it at all. Verbally, she's saying yes, but actually, it means no. Milton gets hooked on observing this. It becomes like a game to him. He starts noticing all these different ways people say no without actually saying it. Through their faces, the tone of their voice, and even their body language. He spots one of his sisters saying yes while her head is subtly shaking no. And another time, a sister offers an apple to another, but her face and arms are so tense, which is an obvious sign that she doesn't really want to share it. But this signal wasn't picked up by his other sister. Since he can't talk or move, he observes everything around him. How people move their hands, the way their eyebrows go up, the tone of their voice, and even when they cross their arms. He starts noticing all these tiny details, like how his sister's neck veins pop out when they're nervous around him, or how their breathing changes when they're bored, usually right before a big yawn. Milton sees that even the way his sisters touch their hair means something. A slow brush back could mean they're annoyed and want the conversation to end, while a quick touch might show they're really into what they're hearing. Being stuck in bed also sharpens his hearing. He can hear conversations from the next room where people aren't trying to act all nice for his sake. He picks up on how people don't always say what they mean directly. Like one of his sisters might drop hints about wanting to borrow clothes or waiting for an apology, hoping someone gets the message without her having to spell it out. But more often than not, her hints don't work, and she ends up having to ask directly, proving the doctor's wrong yet again. This whole experience opens up a whole new world to Milton. He's discovering a secret language of human communication, where true feelings and desires are hidden in gestures, tones, and even the smallest actions. He starts wondering, what if he could get really good at understanding this language? Could he learn to read the subtlest signals, like the tiniest movement of lips, the way someone breathes, or the tension in their hands? A few months have passed, and now he's sitting by a window in a special chair his family made for him. But now, being able to move his lips, he can talk again. However, the rest of his body is still paralyzed. While listening to his brother and sisters playing outside, he wishes he could join them. Then, something incredible happened. He imagines standing up so vividly that he feels a muscle in his leg twitch. It's the first sign of movement since he got paralyzed. The doctor said that Milton would never regain his walking ability again, but they've been wrong before. Milton thinks, if my leg can twitch, maybe I can make it do more. So he starts an experiment. He focuses all his attention on moving a specific muscle, trying to remember how it felt before all this happened. His nurse helps him by massaging the muscle, and slowly but surely, Milton feels a twitch, then a tiny movement. Though it's a super slow process, Milton doesn't give up. First, he manages to stand, then to take a few steps, then to walk around his room, and finally, he can walk outside, going farther and farther each time. This whole experience teaches Milton something very important. The mind and the body operate together more than we usually realize. His willpower and imagination helped him change his physical state. So he decides to learn more about this and chooses to dive into medicine and psychology. The start of a legend. By the 1920s, Milton decided to practice psychiatry, but his approach was totally different from other psychiatrists. While most of them focused a lot on talking, especially about the patient's childhood, to unlock the unconscious mind, Milton, though, paid attention to how people were just being, like their body language, their voice, how they sit or stand. He figured out that words can sometimes hide what's really going on inside us. By making his patients feel extremely comfortable, he looked for the small signs, the little tensions, or needs they might not even say out loud. This way, he dived deep into the world of nonverbal communication, exploring how our bodies can tell stories just as powerful as our words. Milton always said, observe, observe, observe. He always carried a notebook to jot down everything he saw. Since he had to learn how to walk again, he became really interested in how different people walked. He'd spend time watching folks walk all over the city, observing the details of their steps. Some walked with a heavy step, showing they were determined and strong-willed. Others had a lighter step, maybe a bit unsure of themselves. Then there were the people with a smooth, easygoing walk, and those who wandered around, lost in their thoughts. He also noticed the extra swagger some people had, which usually meant they were pretty confident. And then there were the walks that seemed to hide something, like someone trying to look tougher than they felt, or the casual stroll of a teenager acting too cool for school. Milton could even tell when someone's walk changed because they were excited or nervous. All of this walking and watching told him a lot about how people felt and how confident they were. In his office, Milton's desk was all the way across the room so he could watch his patients walk in. He'd see how their walk might change from when they first came in to when they left. He paid attention to how they sat down, how tightly they held on to the chair, and how much they turned to face him while talking. Just by looking at them, without a single word, Milton could understand their problems and stiffness all from their body language, curing the incurable mental illness. So there was a time when Milton was working with people who were really struggling with their mental health. One case that really stood out was a businessman who had made a fortune for himself and lost everything during the Depression. All the businessman could do was cry and keep moving his hands back and forth in front of him. No one could figure out what this meant or how to help him because trying to talk about it didn't work at all. But Milton, he got it right away. He saw the man's hand movements and understood they were showing how stuck he felt, trying and failing to move forward in life. Milton approached him saying, "Your life has had many ups and downs." And he even changed the man's hand movements to go in an up and down motion instead. This new movement caught the man's attention and it became his new habit. Milton then worked with an occupational therapist to give the man blocks of sandpaper and a rough piece of wood. The man got really into sanding the wood, enjoying the work and the smell of it. He stopped crying, started taking woodworking classes, and even made chess sets that he sold. By focusing on what the man was doing with his body and changing that action, Milton was able to unlock something in his mind and cure him. See, Milton had this knack for noticing the little things and how people act differently, especially between men and women. He thought a lot about how these differences showed in their body language. Maybe he got so good at this because he spent a lot of time watching his sisters. He could really get what every little action or gesture meant. Milton Erickson can see people's souls reflecting from body language. On another occasion, A young woman came to him for help. She had been to lots of psychiatrists but hadn't found the right fit. She wondered if Milton could be the one. As they were talking, she didn't really say what her issue was, but Milton noticed something really interesting. She picked some lint off her sleeve in a certain way. He listened to her, asked some simple questions, and then suddenly said with a lot of confidence that he was definitely the right psychiatrist for her. She was pretty surprised by how he was and asked him why he thought so. Then Milton asked her something totally unexpected. "How long have you been wearing women's clothes?" The person was shocked and asked, "How did you know?" Milton explained that the way the lint was picked off, avoiding the chest area in a certain way, was a clue he couldn't ignore. Plus, the way the person spoke, very direct and with a certain rhythm, seemed more masculine to him. Other psychiatrists might have been fooled by the feminine look and the carefully practiced voice. But Milton knew that our bodies often tell the truth even when we try to hide it, curing the untangled web of deception. On a different day, Milton entered his office to see his new female patient waiting for him inside. The woman sought him because she had a phobia of flying, but Milton interrupted her and asked her to get out of the office and then re-enter again. She was a bit annoyed, but did it. Milton watched her walk and how she sat down very carefully. Then he let her talk about her phobia. She told him, "My husband is taking me abroad in September, and I have a deathly fear of being on an airplane." Milton didn't miss a beat and said, "Madame, when you come to a psychiatrist, you can't hold back information. I've noticed something about you. I have to ask you something tough. Does your husband know about your love affair?" The woman was totally shocked and asked, "No, but how did you?" Milton explained, "It's all in the way you're sitting and moving. Your legs are crossed really tightly, and your foot is wrapped all the way around your other ankle. I've noticed that women who are married and seeing someone else often sit like this. Also, you said abroad instead of abroad, like you're feeling guilty. And the way you walked in here told me you're feeling stuck in something complicated." Later, she brought her boyfriend to see Milton, and he was also married. Then Milton asked to meet his wife. When she came in, she sat just like the first woman, totally tensed up with her foot tucked under her ankle. "So, you're having an affair," Milton said to her. She was surprised and asked, "Did my husband tell you?" "No, your body language gave it away. And now I understand why your husband has those constant headaches." Then, Milton ended up helping all of them to get out of their painful situation. As time went on, years passed. Milton's observational power in nonverbal communication became impeccable. It became second nature to him. He could tell what was going on in someone's head just by how they were breathing. And he could even match their breathing pattern to lead his patients into a hypnotic trance and create a deep connection with them. He could also read the little words or names people would sort of whisper without making a sound, a trick often used by people who claim they can tell the future or do magic tricks. Milton could even tell when his secretary was having her period just by observing the heaviness of her typing. And by looking at someone's hands, the way they walked, how they held their head, or the tone of their voice, he could often guess their job. To people around him, it almost seemed like Milton had some kind of special power, like he could read minds or something. But the truth is, he had just spent a lot of time learning and practicing how to understand this second language of our body signals and movements. How did Milton do it? Milton Erickson's journey changed when he suddenly couldn't move. When he watched and listened to his sisters, he didn't just see and hear what they were doing. He started feeling what they might be feeling inside. Like when they said one thing but meant another, he tried to feel those mixed feelings himself to understand them better. If he noticed they looked tense, he'd sort of feel that tension in his own body to get why they were feeling uneasy around him. Milton found out that understanding people without words isn't just about thinking hard or trying to figure out what their gestures mean. It's more about really feeling it, like you're stepping into their shoes for a moment. It's this special kind of knowing that connects us more to our instincts, the part of us that's more animal-like. It has something to do with our mirror neurons, which help us feel what others are feeling just by watching them. This way of connecting and understanding is deep and goes beyond just words. To really get good at understanding this special language of body signals and feelings, Milton had to learn to chill out and not jump to put everything into words or boxes right away. He had to put his own thoughts and wants on the back burner and focus more on the person he was with, trying to tune into their feelings and the things that their bodies were saying without words. By doing this, Milton started to change. He became super aware of all the little signals people give off all the time and turned into someone who could really connect with what others were feeling deep down. This skill made him way better at talking and being with people, creating a strong connection because he could understand them on a whole different level. As Milton kept changing and growing, he saw that most people were moving in a totally different direction. Instead of becoming more aware of others, they were getting more wrapped up in themselves and not paying attention to what was around them. Milton had lots of stories from his work that showed how people just weren't seeing things that were right in front of them. Like this one time, he asked a bunch of new doctors at the hospital to watch an older lady in her bed and figure out why she might be stuck in bed just by looking. They stared for 3 whole hours, and you won't believe that they have missed something huge. Both of her legs were gone. And then there were people who came to his talks and wondered why he never used this odd-looking stick he had with him for pointing at things on stage. They hadn't noticed it was actually his cane because Milton needed it to walk due to a limp. Lastly, Milton thought that life's challenges make a lot of people turn into themselves so much that they stop seeing what's right in front of them. They don't have the bandwidth to just notice things anymore, and because of that, they miss out on this whole other way of communicating using the second language. And if you want to learn more about how to read somebody's body language like Milton Erickson, let me know in the comment section below.